This is Colony Road at Colony Hill Lane in Wilton, where SMUD is testing a new piece of equipment it hopes will at the very least save it some money and some long-term power outages caused by a vehicle hitting a power pole. When that happens, quite often it's several hours before a lot of the people who are on SMUD power get their juice back on. So they are testing out these yellow things that they call a Raptor. As you can see, it goes around the base of the pole and it can take a pretty good impact without the pole itself being damaged. We'll get all the details here in just a moment, but as you can clearly see, it's in more than one piece, so if it gets hit from one side, they only have to replace the one side and it can be right back to work. And they won't be putting them on all the poles. Part of the reason they picked this location is because it's a pole that's been hit multiple times. And you can see the reason why. Colony here curves around, and if you're not paying attention, or you fall asleep behind the wheel, or you have something happen, then you're liable to go straight into that pole, and that's why this one is a particular target. So we'll talk with the SMUD supervisor here, and if you'll stick with the video for a few minutes, and we'll get all of the details, including how much these will cost versus how much it costs to replace the pole, not to mention the effort it takes to keep SMUD workers safe when it comes time for pole replacement. We're with Jason McAllister, Director, Grid Assets, Strategic Services for SMUD. And Jason, you know, we were talking about this in the newsroom. How many times we hear our traffic guy say, hey, car hit a power pole. Or how many times we hear power's going to be out in a neighborhood for a little while your crews are trying to repair this thing. So I would imagine that's sort of the idea behind what you're trying to do to protect these poles, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons. I mean, the program specifically is for community employee safety, but obviously another big aspect of that is our reliability.
So tell us a little bit about, I heard it described like a big yellow SpongeBob thing that's going around the base of these poles. What are we doing for this pilot program?
So what we've done initially is we've taken a look at all the poles that have been hit over the last 5 to 10 years, and we've determined the poles that have been hit, in this case, 3 or more times. And so basically these apparatuses have very limited use. They can't be more in a street that's more than 30 miles an hour, and there's some other things. They have to have access. You can't put it in the middle of a sidewalk or something like that. So they have limited use to them, but the theory is that they will absorb a lot of the shock for safety of the community or the driver, which hopefully will eliminate or reduce the chances of damaging our facilities or our equipment, in this case, the power poles.
Okay, so what is the material you're using?
So it's made out of plastic. It's a technology that we came about probably in the last 4 or 5 months. Some other utilities, San Diego and Portland, are using them now, and it's just, it's basically, it's not even filled with anything, but they're pretty heavy duty, and it just absorbs the impact from the vehicle. So it's made out of kind of plastic. I don't know the exact compound of it, but yeah, it's like a big plastic SpongeBob. Okay,
so you sort of touched on it a little bit. How hard a hit can they take and still be effective?
So the rating is it can't be on a thoroughfare that's more than 30 miles an hour. So 30 miles an hour would be the impact zone of it. So we obviously are targeting those areas where it makes sense to do it in a roadway that is no more than 30 miles an hour.
So I don't know how much experimenting you've had the opportunity to do with them yet, but let's say somebody hits it at 40 or 50, will it at least help sort of minimize the impact, even if it's not totally effective?
I would say yes, I would assume so. We have not done any studies, and we just got these 2 installed, so we don't have any data of somebody hitting them, but the manufacturer, they had videos on, and they showed varying, and I don't know if they changed the speeds that they did, but it really significantly reduced the impact. In a lot of cases, the way they're designed, it kind of deflects the car away from the pole.
All right, now you mentioned some other markets where they've put this stuff to use. What have they told you about the kinds of successes that they've had with it?
It's funny, they just started theirs as well. Now they've started doing more, but they've yet to have hits. The last we had reached out to them, they hadn't had any hits to them yet either. So they're still waiting to, they're still waiting to have an incident happen to be able to do some testing or to see what the impact or what it does or doesn't do.
So this one might seem like kind of an obvious question, but how do you come up with these locations that have been hit 3 or more times? Is it just a matter of looking at statistics, or is it something where you've had a problem area?
Yeah, so we obviously, for all the car polls that we have data on every poll that we have. We're required to have a lot of data because we inspect the polls on intervals and everything. So we have the data. So we know by pulling the data out of our system of how many polls have been hit, how many times they have been. And so we're obviously looking to where the Raptor will work as far as speed's concerned and other factors of where we can put them. And then it's based on number of hits. We're trying to ensure that we're putting it in a place where we've seen some significant incidents and we want to try to reduce those, so we're picking those first. And to a secondary piece to that would be looking at how many customers it affects if that poll was to get taken out again.
Okay, so let's take those one thing at a time, and let's start with customer effects. In those areas, what's the effect been on customers that will hopefully be saved by adding this equipment?
Well, it'll reduce a lot of things. There hopefully will not be a power outage. So, in some cases, these can take up to 8 hours, depending on where their location is, traffic issues, time of day that it happens. And so, the customer's not going to know anything. They're just not going to have a power outage from this. Ultimately, customers in the surrounding area aren't going to have to worry about the traffic issues with our crews having to be out there to replace that pole. So you're not going to have that congestion or those issues with that as well. And then hopefully by that, the person that was in the incident or in the accident hopefully will walk away with a lot less injuries than they would have had there not been one there.
Now, it might be too early to ask this question, but have we started to work out the numbers in terms of what it might cost if we put these things where they're appropriate system-wide versus what you'll save from the damage that's avoided because of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big ones is it's about, on an average, about $11,000 to replace a power pole. And there's a lot of factors to that. These run probably about half of that cost, and so you're saving that. Plus, then when you have these outages, you have areas where you can have claims and things of that nature. So, and then just the inconvenience to the customer, you take that away as well by not having an outage.
And I imagine it's a smaller amount, but you're talking about losing rate-paying time as long as they're out too, so there's a little bit of a loss there as
absolutely.
Well, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Now, I might have asked you this before, so I apologize if I repeat myself, but how many hits can they take? Is it just one and done and then it has to be replaced?
That's a really good question. Yeah, they're modular, so if they hit the front side of it, you're only replacing one half of it. So you basically just have to get one half of them. And they're set up so if somebody was coming the opposite direction and went across a lane or something and hit it, it would protect it. But yeah, it's a one and done. It would depend. A direct hit, obviously, one and done. A glancing blow, you might get away with it after an inspection, but for the most part, you're replacing the modular piece that got hit. And that's the good part, is they are modular, so you don't have to buy a full one to replace it if the backside of it didn't get hit or damaged.
Now, I know of one area where it's being tested out in Wilton. Do we have other test areas already set up or going in soon?
Yeah, we have another one that's set up off of Grant Line Road, and we're in the process of doing 4 more locations, probably in the next 2 to 3 months. I would say that we're going to be installing those. We're looking to install up to 8 in this initial pilot.
Now, based on what you know so far, which I understand is pretty limited, are we leaning toward this maybe being a system-wide thing?
System-wide, probably not. There's other aspects of this program that we look at. Raptor, these pole barriers are not the only thing we're looking at. We also, ultimately we want to take these poles and move them more out of harm's way. And so that's where this program started, with meeting with all of the cities and local agencies in our service territory to kind of come up and talk about some other solutions, and also working with them as they widen roads and everything, that we're part of that discussion, so we don't wind up being back of curb right on the road. We wind up being further off the road, which kind of takes the whole situation out of it. So in a lot of cases, and in these 2 pilots that we currently have, one in Wilton and one off of Grant Line, These are poles that this is going to be a temporary thing for location for these Raptors until we can actually move the poles. So we're in process of moving these as well. That won't always be the case. There will be somewhere that will be the only thing that we can do is put them there. But system-wide, I would say this is going to be our only one. The other one is we're going with more visibility strips. We're required to put visibility strips on the poles. You probably see them. There's 3 yellow strips on each pole. We're required to do that. We've gone out and found some that are even brighter, and hopefully will bring to it the attention to the driver earlier so they don't hit our pole. So those are some of the areas that are different areas other than the Raptor that are looking to do.
So even with the plans to move some of the poles, if nothing changes with the data you have you at least mapped out where these Raptors could potentially go?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of data of where we've had multiple hits and in areas where they would make perfect sense. So as we get more and more data, it is quite possible and very likely that we will look to put more of those out within our service territory.
How long of a project is the pole moving?
You know, it depends. If you're just moving one, yeah, it takes up to about 8 hours to move the pole. But the whole process of going through the local agency to get the right of way and everything, it can take months, and design and all of that. The actual physical, when the crews get out to replace it, it can be up to 8 hours. But like I said, from the fact of getting a right of way or the requirements that we need through the local agency or the city through the design process, and then that it can take months in some cases to get the ability to move that pole.
So this is plans that are years down the line?
Can be, yes, yeah.
All right. Jason McAllister with SMUD. Appreciate that, Jason. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.